Niamh, if I was to summarize your comment, do you think the Wall Street reaction is justified? It sounds like your answer is yes, that these traditional software companies are at risk.
Yes, they're at risk, but I don't think, like anything, it's a blanket sweeping statement of all of it will die overnight. It depends
Yeah.
on how they adapt and where they want to plug in and make themselves relevant in the new world. I cannot underestimate or understate how unbelievably different the product release cycle is for Gen AI than it was in the past. It's just an entirely different way of building and releasing capabilities. You have to kind of almost redo your entire org and workflow and divisions. And we're kind of the classic building the plane as you jump off the cliff whilst figuring out, is it even a plane you want, or is it a boat or a helicopter?
I think Niamh is right. The moat's collapsing. The captive customers are seeing a way out. And I think generally that software is so terrible in the world, and it has been for decades and decades. Someone will eventually figure a way out of it. Maybe we're figuring a way out of it with AI. I'm not sure it's even AI. Maybe it's just, we have greater flexibility in our abilities to create software. We can handle complexity better because of what people call AI. And these things enable us to break down the moats.
I do wonder, though, in the future, what organizations will look like at all. Will the idea of a company in the standard way with employees and a leadership team and even make sense anymore? I think humanity will actually speciate into two main groups. So there's going to be one group that wants to be, let's say, merged or combined with AI. So these people will have all the brain-computer interfaces. And then there'll be a large group of people that don't want to do that at all. They'll want to remain human. They absolutely do not want to plug their brains into any kind of AI or anything like that. They'll even move away from social media because technology is just becoming kind of crazy. So I think that's what's going to happen.
Sendel's going to be so disappointed he missed this one.
In future, he'll have to send his AI avatar agent to represent him in the debate.
Welcome to the Darby Mills series.
Welcome to the Darby Mills series, Pushing AI to the Limit. I'm Ajay, co-founder of Intrepid Growth Partners. Today we're diving into the market's recent sell-off of software stock. I'm joined by my collaborators, Rich, pioneer of reinforcement learning, Niamh, applied AI scientist who optimizes foundation models, and Suzanne, inventor entrepreneur working on AI, robotics, and quantum computing. On February 4, Reuters published an article with the headline, Selloff wipes out nearly $1 trillion from software and services stocks as investors debate AI's existential threat. In that article, the authors write, software stocks have been under pressure in recent months as AI has gone from a tailwind for many of these companies to a possible disruption. The latest sell-off was triggered by a new legal tool from Anthropic's Claude, large language model. The tool, a plugin for Claude's agent for tasks across legal, sales, marketing, and data analysis, underscored the push by LLMs into the application layer, where these firms are increasingly muscling into lucrative enterprise businesses for revenue they need to fund massive investments. If successful, investors worry, it could wreak havoc across industries from finance to law and coding. So with that, let's start the show. We're just going to do a short segment on the reaction to this Wall Street so-called sell-off of software. Two things. Do you think that traditional software businesses are significantly at risk? And then secondly, your framework for how should we even think about this problem? And so whether or not a person agrees with your yes or no answer, they probably can learn a lot just from thinking about how you think through the problem. We'll follow our same ordering here. We'll start with Niamh and then Rich and Suzanne.
Okay, so following the theme of Intrepid and Darby Mills of what does it look like at the extreme, I think we leverage Elon's mega hard analogy, which is in response to Microsoft and all their 365 tools we have today. He believes in a agentic future called mega hard, whereby each of those tools can just be replicated yourself, as we see now, where you can just spin up your own PowerPoint, Excel, etc. mechanisms from scratch in your own agentic tooling. In terms of the progress towards that point, you always see it today in terms of how both existing systems and new entrants are tackling the problem. So, for example, let's take like systems of record as a database or a CRM that organizations have built up today, do you decide to build an AI tool atop of that and work with the existing provider to AIfy them and make them applicable in this new world in a collaborative approach? Or do you kind of Trojan horse it of build around it and just have connectors and adapters that suck all the data out of it and you disintermediate them from the end user and you know the customer? Or do you say, to hell with it, that's the old world, I'm going to be AI native and spin up a mechanism that very quickly replicates the tooling of the past, and with enough usage aggregates all the information that becomes your new data gravity moat and sticky mechanism? So that's kind of the way that it's being approached today. And alongside, you have the foundation model providers themselves, whereby it's just a matter of time and prioritization as and when they get to tackle each of the various verticals or sectors and tooling within that, and each of the general tools and workflows that folk use, and optimize it over time with RLHF or partnering with Merkle to get all the workflows and integrating that, and then packaging it up into a single plugin which combines your schools, your MCPs, your agents into an out-of-the-box turnkey solution that's as good as any single standalone system. So I do feel that the old way of doing things and SaaS is being attacked at multiple angles, and even those incumbents themselves are really struggling as to how do I flip my old way of doing things into the new, the classic innovator's dilemma, right? It is a lot harder to break away from the past when that is your cash cow and the thing that all your users are using. If you have a huge incumbent base that is enterprise and requires, secure systems and mechanisms, you can't just move fast and break things. And a lot of even the SaaS first companies have found it exceptionally hard to adapt to AI because it's an entirely new way of doing product, Gen AI. You don't have a roadmap and an approach like the past. So some of them like Intercom and Replit have found that they've actually had to create a separate, almost subdivision within the company and a skunk works to spin up and figure out what does their world look like in an AI first approach, put different people into the company and split it off as a separate division. And then once they've kind of reached parity on their product and solidified it, then kind of merging it back in. So it's not just a clickbait headline. This is a real struggle that those of us in the field over the past 4 years in the Gen AI spectrum has really struggled with on how to tackle it and what's the right way. And at the moment, it's just attack at every single angle, bottom up, sideways, top down, and from behind.
So, Niamh, if I was to summarize your comment in the first part of, do you think the Wall Street market reaction is justified? It sounds like your answer is yes, that these traditional software companies are at risk.
Yes, they're at risk, but I don't think, like anything, it's a blanket sweeping statement of all of it will die overnight. It depends on how they adapt and where they want to plug in and make themselves relevant in the new world. As a whole, I find Wall Street too reactive with their spikes, but generally it's directionally correct.
And one of your key arguments is, even though they're the ones with the current user base, and the virtue of having a user base is users generate data. And in some sense, that's the context of experience. When Rich talks about the era of experience, those software companies are benefiting from experience because people are using their thing. And you're saying that even though they have that big advantage, the reason they might still suffer, you made reference to the innovator's dilemma. And one of the key insights in the innovator's dilemma is that there's some new value proposition, and the incumbents are listening to their current customers who don't value that new value proposition. And it's in their interest to listen to their current customers because that's where their revenues are coming from, and they don't want to cannibalize their revenues. And so even though they might hear this podcast and they might agree that, okay, the future looks like the future Niamh described, but even then they still struggle in making those changes because of the momentum they have of serving their existing customers.
Correct. And there's two other things that are different this time. One is, in the past, they used to have a data gravity moat, whereby it's a bit like banks, where they don't charge you for transferring money in, but they charge you and limit you for transferring money out. A lot of the cloud providers and system of record tools had that too, where they had huge egress fees and caps on how much data you could transfer out. But what's happening now is that the customers themselves, the end users who have an AWS license or a Salesforce license or a ServiceNow license, are just giving permission of that to the tool. And so the AI is able to suck it out directly because it's acting as the end user. And so that's the shift whereby all these connectors and adapters are enabling them to create data pipelines that weren't possible in the past because it had this huge, you actually had to shift it out of one system of record into another as opposed to just a pipeline. And then the second thing is just, as I mentioned, I cannot underestimate or understate how unbelievably different the product release cycle is for Gen AI than it was in the past. It's just an entirely different way of building and releasing capabilities that you have to kind of almost redo your entire org and workflow and divisions and stages and gates and policies, etc. So it's not only wow, this is a new technological shift, but it's an entirely new way of working. And so how do you change the org and the whole behavior within the company and all its policies and ways of work, as well as the tools and the mechanisms at the speed of light, where we're all getting whiplash every day as to new discoveries and new mechanisms. And, we're kind of the classic building the plane as you jump off the cliff whilst figuring out, is it even a plane you want, or is it a boat or a helicopter? And are these the right people on the boat? So it's exceptionally difficult.
And Niamh, last question for you before we go to Rich is, in terms of the moat that software companies have, let's say traditional software companies have, relative to, let's say, the foundation models, isn't it the case in the age of experience that the most valuable resource is to be at the tip of the spear, like where the experience happens? So let's say with healthcare, there can be all kinds of predictions made based on textual data and image data and so on, but where we actually learn whether the lesion is cancerous or not, when they get the biopsy, that isn't whoever owns the last mile in getting the biopsy data. Ultimately, like that's the key moat. And so if a company has that, then even no matter how sophisticated the foundation models get, if they don't get it all the way to the end, aren't they missing the most important piece? And that's the piece that allows these software companies to.
Correct. And that's why one of the points I alluded to, I think health is separate, and why you've not seen the sell-off in health as you have in like legal, finance and other SaaS tools, because the key point now is that the foundation models, as they're becoming increasingly verticalized and ensuring that they have the end application as well, they disintermediate the consumer and the end user from the existing SaaS tools. If you never have to leave your foundation model tooling, then there's no need to actually go in and log into all the other systems. A classic example was Claude Code. They released the model for Claude Code, but what happened was it was Windsurf, Codium, Devon, Magic, all of these cursor tools that spun up, and they owned the end user, and they were getting those behavioral insights where things would log out, all that rich contextual important data to improve the model. And that's why you then saw the response of the CLI, the terminal, the Claude co-work, and similarly Codex tooling from OpenAI to ensure that actually there's no need to leave. And now likewise, you're seeing plugins and desktop apps where the aim is to be that ephemeral model in the background, which you don't use, and all your workflows are within that. And you just connect to all the SaaS tools of the past, right? There's your connect tool out to Box, to Salesforce, to Slack, etc. And you just have this single UI that is within the foundation model itself. Now, currently you see customization. It's, as I said, it's just a matter of time before they build out to all the various edge cases and verticals. So today you'll see specialized wrapper tools that specialize in the UX UI for that particular workflow, and they really understand their end users and plug the foundation models in. Over time, that will probably invert, whereby the foundation models understand all those workflows and UIs over time. But now we go back to that recursive internal debate around general versus specialist models and tooling. But that is a key reason for the risk, is that disintermediation of the end user, and hence that accumulation of data, stickiness, and workflow insight that's being lost to the AI as well.
Thanks, Niamh. Rich?
I think Niamh is right that what we are seeing is the moats collapsing. The captive customers are seeing a way out. I think generally that software is so terrible in the world, and it has been for decades and decades. And I just think of like the university software systems for human resources and running everything. It's just so clunky and horrid, and yet we can't get out of it. We're spending huge amounts of money. We need to evaluate our graduate students each year. We get a terrible new system, and we spend huge amounts of money, and it's just so horrible. I mean, there's so many ways you could do it much simpler and much better. Why does this happen? It's the moats, and it's the legacy systems and the systems of reference, and you just can't get out of it. And this has been going on for forever, and it has to break eventually, because it's so horrible. Someone will eventually figure a way out of it. Maybe we're figuring a way out of it with AI. I'm not sure it's even AI. Maybe it's just we have greater flexibility in our abilities to create software. We can handle complexity better because of what people call AI. And these things enable us to break down the moats. And this will set free all those customers, because they definitely want to go elsewhere. And so I think we're just realizing that it's going to be possible for the customers to escape the moats. And because of the ability to remake legacy systems and handle the complexity of remaking them in a systematic, sound way, relatively cheaply with small teams, and that's the music that we're starting to hear, and we see it. It'll come. It's coming.
Thanks, Rich. So then, to summarize, you also, like Niamh, agree that the sell-off in software is at least directionally correct, without commenting on the magnitude.
Well, the main thing is I hope that it is this falling of the moats. I think they're hearing it, and I hope it's correct. I hope the moats are falling. That will suck all the value out of these huge software legacy systems and allow them to be replaced. They will consume much less resources. So it's like tremendous news for the world and for industry. Everyone will be freed. They'll be able to do more things. These companies that have been suffocating people will greatly lose value, and that's a really good thing.
This is the Emancipation edition of Darby Mill, Liberation. Suzanne, over to you.
I think it's real. And reading the article, it was a bit scary, mostly like a shock type thing, like a future shock. I think Rich is right. I do worry, is replacing a legacy system with a black box kind of any better? I think there's maybe pros and cons to both. I still can't get over the hallucination issue in these kind of models, so I guess you're going to have that too. I do wonder, though, in the future what organizations will look like at all. Will the idea of a company in the standard way with employees and a leadership team and even make sense anymore? Because I don't think human minds and human brains are able to keep up with these things very, very soon. What I think will happen, though, and maybe this is a little bit sci-fi, and I can finish off with a spicy sci-fi ending, is I think humanity will actually speciate into two main groups. So there's going to be one group that wants to be the let's say merged or combined with AI. So these people will have all the brain computer interfaces and the modules that allow them to kind of connect and merge their minds with AIs of the future. So what they can do is help provide what Ajay would call the judgment part of it, where AI is providing the prediction, the human mind continues to provide the judgment and that human factor. But these will be kind of a new breed of people that will be kind of hybrids. And I think that will happen. And then there'll be a large group of people that don't want to do that at all. They'll want to remain human. They absolutely do not want to plug their brains into any kind of AI or anything like that. They'll even move away from social media because technology is just becoming kind of crazy. And so I think that's what's going to happen. And then the question is, how do those people end up being supported? Because they can no longer work, because they are competing now with people that are actually interfacing with the AI. And I think that's why, as Niamh was saying, we need to look at some kind of UBI system or something. So there will still be a choice for which path you can go down. But I think we should look at how we can give people that choice, because not everyone's going to want to keep going down this crazy grinding people into these weird cyber hybrid business AI minded people, right? But not everyone wants to do that. So how can we have a world where the people that want that get to do it, and the people that don't want that don't have to do it?
Sendel's going to be so disappointed he missed this one. This is what happens when we do our session without the MIT economics professor.
In future, we have to send his AI avatar agent to represent him in the debate.
That we end up in speciation, and that'll teach him. I should give Niamh and Rich 30 seconds to respond to Suzanne, because she's proposed something so outrageous.
Well, just like on the lesser element of it in terms of organizations, I completely agree that companies will, I don't even know if they'll exist or in what form, but it won't be the current, your company is the aggregate of your people and IP. It will be very much more like the system and the IP with humans polishing the servers around the edges type of mechanism. And so occasionally I get asked, and consultants get asked, what does AI mean for my company, and what will it look like in 3, 5, 10 years time? And I'm like, in 10 years time, I don't think you're going to exist as a company anymore. So, and that has huge repercussions, as Suzanne says, for society writ large, and not only how do we sustain ourselves, but kind of lots of people do get purpose and meaning from their work, and not everyone wants to be hobbyists and spending time with the family. So that is the huge kind of Davos-esque debate that needs to be had, and you have folk like Dario, etc., continuing to ring the alarm bells on that. And in terms of the merging, absolutely, you see it, the first steps of it in terms of the 10x engineers in the Valley, and those who lean into sci-fi already creating their molt bots or agents online, and you've even seen systems be set up for when a person dies, how do they upload all their kind of social media and feeds to get a representative AI that can continue operating post-life. You see it with actors trying to push back on, actually harping back to our previous discussion, auto clauses within their contracts that say the studio gets the rights to their human form, voice, etc., into perpetuity, such that they can have their AI representations going forward. So even those who choose not to merge, there are those who will have kind of digital representatives and life forms, and then there are the extremes, and you'll see it first, no doubt, probably in the military element, dog fighting. I think one of the things, AJ, at CDL, when Neuralink were talking, and it was such an obvious statement, but it was a real aha moment to me, where they were saying that paraplegics that currently use the tool, one of the mechanisms that they test the capability of the model is using gaming systems and esports. And then they suddenly found that, hang on a second, the paraplegics are much better with Neuralink and outcompete the everyday humans because they don't have to actuate the muscle to press the controller. They can just think and instantaneously control the screen. Well, that is Suzanne's paradigm right there, already happening in a superficial activity of esports, but you can see that very quickly going to dogfighting and defense and into other mechanisms of, quant trading, etc., as well as everyday work. And people should be given choice, but exactly as Suzanne says, there needs to be a self-sustainable mechanism for those who opt out, where they need to be provided for if there is no mechanism of work, and it doesn't become that dystopian, the haves and have-nots, where they have to do back-breaking work or become subservient to the hybrid mechanism. So we can laugh and eye roll and think it's all sci-fi, but this is happening a lot faster than people realize and is becoming real very quickly, and is something that we do need to think about alongside the forest fires, geopolitics and everything else that's destabilizing in the world at the moment. But it's not a trivial fact, and indeed perhaps one that we should get Sendel back on to debate in a standalone session.
Niamh, thank you. Rich, last 30 seconds are yours.
Wow. Yeah, of course, I'm really into speciation. I'm really into having lots of experiments and diversity. But oddly, it's sort of like let 1,000 flowers bloom. But I don't think they all need to bloom. You got to plant 1,000 flowers. Some of them will not do that well. I'm not into planning for everybody and for ensuring that people could have some outcome, some good outcome, even if they're not doing something that anyone else finds useful. But I'm really into diversity and experiments, and they should be real experiments. And I don't see it as something to be afraid of. I think the craziness of people all trying different things is not crazy, and it shouldn't be crazy, and it shouldn't be something we're afraid of. We should embrace it. It's a way to deal with complexity and with disagreement. People disagree. The real craziness, the violence happens when we insist that they have to agree. And speciation means you don't have to agree. You can try different things, and that's okay. I think we have to embrace diversity and difference, and that's how we get peace.
And that's a wrap for today. Thanks to Rich, Niamh, and Suzanne. We've also posted links to our hosts and guest social media feeds and web pages in the show notes, as well as our podcast webpage located online at insights.intrepidgp.com/podcast. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
The views, opinions, and information expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Intrepid Growth Partners. This content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial, investment, or legal advice.